I'm going to be using Sublime and giving you some instructions of information that we've gone over in class a couple of times, but I thought it would be very helpful to have something online for you to go back to and revisit when needed. Let's start off with just the basic tags that we've covered in class. Uh, this says port page. I want to start off with a brand new page. I'm using Sublime, as I mentioned, and I'm going to automatically first save it as an index.html page that identifies it as an HTML, so I do not have to go any place and say this is going to be an HTML page. So we start off with the open bracket, exclamation, doc type, then lowercase html, and then we have HTML. And let's go. You'll have HTML or close HTML and just move it down. I don't know how many lines we will have in between, so I will just scoot it down like that. Then I indent a little bit. Then I'm going to put my head tags in. Remember, in the head tags we said that's where we will put things like the title and other items of the sort, such as linking to external files. And then see if you can answer to yourself what the next tag would be. After you've got the head tags, the next thing you need is the body to go ahead and start off actually doing any developing. You have to have your body tag and then close body, because it will do the same as the HTML did, and it'll go down there. And you don't have to close it here. I mean, as you can see, the HTML moves with it. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to delete those spaces. Those will be at the ending, though. So after our body tag, HTML5 has offered us some new tags, one of which we mentioned just a little bit at the beginning of the semester, which is our header. And then after, we also talked about the section tag, and we only mentioned these in almost, it was as if it was in passing. So we have, after that, we have the aside, which is where you would have the sidebar. Now, yes, I am giving you some extras. And then the footer, and then the closing of the body and the HTML. Now, if we go ahead and save this and go to view it, open the browser, it is blank. But if we look at our source code, there's the code that we put in, so it is there. However, we did not put any content in. That's why we don't see anything yet. So let's go back to Sublime and let's begin adding some content of some sort. First thing we want to do is we want to add something in the header tags. And let's just say this is the header section. And of course, we did not put the titles in that go between the two head tags. Do not make the mistake of mixing title or header and head tags. Head tags are what contain things that are going to display either on the upper portion, the tabs that show up here, or will make other things happen, such as importing JavaScript, CSS3, things of that sort. It's more like an identifying area between the two head tags. So in the head tags, let's go ahead and get, or the title tags, let's go ahead and name it HTML5 and CSS3, because that's what we're going to do. It mainly in this one right here. And then we have a little bit of content between the two header tags. And then on our section, let's give our section an ID. Now, we will talk about this later, but when you start to tell different areas such as header and section and aside what to do, where to be located, and so forth, they have to have an ID or a class, one of the two, that will give them some kind of, that will be referenced in the CSS file and say, this is what you're supposed to do, here's where you're supposed to display, and here's what you're supposed to look like. So in the ID, let's just call this our main content. I have a specific way of doing mine. I do it main and a capital C, content, separating the two words without putting a space in. When it comes to the names that you make up yourself, I have no issues. I have no problems with capitalization. My only reason for emphasizing non-capitals is so that you'll remember. However, when something doesn't work properly, you'll be able to look back in your CSS and say, oh, I put main content in all lower cases, or main content all capitals. And then you look in your HTML file, as we're looking at right here, and you see everything was lowercase but the C. Or you can just call it main, or you can call it anything that you want that you will remember. Now, of course, section, the word section is the element, ID is the attribute, and main content's the value. It's the value that we gave it. So therefore, you only close the element. Elements are the only things that ever have to close. So it's fine the way it is. So let's say, well, what does it look like now? Save it, or Command S, right click and open in browser, and it says this is the header section. Okay, well, that's what I told it to say. Let's go back to Sublime. Now that we have added this is the header section, let's go ahead and go to each part and put some kind of content in it. Simplest content right now would be to say this is the main content, since that is what we gave the ID. This is the main content. Aside is going to be the sidebar, so let's go ahead and say I don't talk like this. I normally say this is the sidebar, but I want to make this smaller. And then the footer. This is the footer of my page. There. Now that I've completed it, Control S or Command S if you're using Sublime, or for that matter, if you're using Notepad++, works with Control S. So I want to look at it and say, well, what does it look like? So I go to Firefox, the refresher, reload, and there is the content. This is the header section. This is the main content. Why does it all look the same? Well, ask yourself that. Why does it look the same? So to make it different, what we have to do is if it's in a header section, well, let's say we want this, well, this is going to be a header, then let's go ahead and put the largest one in there. As you may recall, there's H1 through H6. H1 being the largest, going down to H6. Okay, that's going to make that one a little bit larger. Now let's go ahead and do some formatting for underneath it, and or I'm sorry, underneath the H1, and put it as in a paragraph. Okay, there's the two paragraph tags. Now what I want to do is in between, I want to put some content. So I'll say, let's say this is a paragraph example, for instance, of the content under header. Okay, now I've already closed it down here. And again, that's something that you can do it the way you want to. I put it this way so that I can see it easier. I can take a glance and see exactly where things are. Well, now ask yourself, what is this going to look like? Before we look at it, I want you to think about that. And then I'm going to take a look, refresh the page. Well, there's been a slight change. This is bigger. This is pretty much the same as the rest of it, even though it's an additional line. It's still the same size as these. So we don't have any changes. Why is that? Let me explain the reasoning. We have to have what's called a CSS file. That's because CSS helps you to format a page or pages. CSS stands for Cascade Style Sheet, because you have one CSS file and it applies to every page. So therefore you make one change on a CSS document that looks similar to this, and it will change the whole website, unless you tell it otherwise. Well, let's go to File New, and I'm going to tell it that this one's going to be saved as, and again, save it on my desktop just for simplicity, style.css, which is a very common name for doing style sheets. To show you just how this works, let's first go in here between the head tags. One of the things we talked about was linking to external files. Well, style.css is going to be an external file now. External in the sense it's another file outside of the index.html. So every HTML file that you want to reference and look at the CSS will have to have this line in it. Link rel equals, and then quotes, style sheet. Then outside of the quotes, do another space, href equals, and this is where you put in the name of it. Quotes, style.css, and then we're going to tell it the type, which type is something that they have now decided to remove as a absolute necessity. It is not absolutely necessary to put it in HTML5, specifying the type, because it's detected right here. And style shoot is what I put. I think I better fix that. And link, it's linking to, and relation, and it's going to be related to the HTML file. So that's what the rel stands for. And let's go ahead and save it. Again, there will be no changes because we did not put anything in the style sheet that it's looking at. So let's just, for the sake of argument, let's put something in there. Here's what it looks like. You can take an existing tag, like body, an existing element, if you will, and then you type in, you start typing in background color. Oh, equals. Well, it automatically put the hyphen in, color, colon, space, And let's just say red. Every CSS line has to be ended with a semicolon. Every line within. Every element that has been declared, this is a declaration. It's a declaration of body. You're declaring it will be red. Every portion of this where you say body, open with the curly bracket, background color, all the things you want to put within body, it has to be closed with the curly bracket. The semicolon closes each line. So let's go to index.html and let's just go ahead and open it in the browser. Let's refresh it. Reload. Okay, well, it looks like the red worked. So, as I had told you, that's exactly what it's going to do. It's going to look at the CSS file and it's going to tell what happens. Such as these lines. You can say, well, I want all H1s to be white, for instance. So you can say, well, H1, open curly bracket, like I told you. Font family, first of all, let's say let's call it Helvetica. Because if you notice, it was a Times New Roman looking, and Helvetica is not. So let's go font size. Well, we can specify. See, this is something I told you earlier. H1 has its own size, but I want H1 to be I want it to be different. Let's say 1 EM. And I'll explain those more. Color is going to be, well, it's on red. Let's make it white for the sake of argument. Command S or Control S, depending on what you're using. And let's reload it and see what it looks like. Well, now it looks more Arial-like, and I gave it a 1, so it shrunk. But it's bold. So just a little bit more play in here. Let's do a 2 EM or 2.5. 2.5 EM. You can be very specific on your sizes when it comes to this. And that's something I like about CSS a lot. There, now you can have a huge font of the 2.5. So, if you're wanting something that stands out and it's like one word and you want it straight across, you can do that. Let's go back to the index file though, because there are some things that we did not completely review. And those things are linking an unordered list and images. So let's put also under the paragraph, after the paragraph is closed here, let's go ahead and add a link. ahref, if you recall, equals, and let's just do Google, for instance. Okay, now that is referred to as an absolute path. When you're telling me that you're going to link to another page of yours, you have, let's say, a page called services.html, then you do not need to put all this in there. All you need to give me is services.html. That's all you need to put in for it to work properly. You close this and then you put the name that's going to display for the user. So the user will see that, the word Google, what's in white, at least on this screen. It's going to be white. And then let's add an unordered list. Just again for review of what an unordered list looks like. And I want to make these each one a link. Link number 1. Two, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I have myself a list of links now. And then I close the unordered list. Unordered list means it's going to have a bullet point beside it. If you put OL up here, these would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beside them. They would have the number. And then something else I said we would do is we would add an image. So since image is something that we have done in class, this is a good place to review it. If you have a folder where you keep all of your images, you would have a path that looks something like this. Let's say this is where your logo is. Logo.png. So it's under the images. This is also called a relative path. It's relative because your files are on the same server. This one goes to another server. And so just remember, if you have all these lines in front of it, it's the path that goes outside of your account, outside to somebody else's development. And let's go ahead and just make this, if you recall in class we did an alternate tag. And just name it logo. My company logo. And then we can actually put the size of the image, something that I referenced in class and said it's really not necessary. No, sorry, it's not size. height, height equals, let's say 200. Width equals 300. And let's see what happens. We don't really have an image for one, so it's going to be broken. And depending on which browser you use, we'll say how that appears. So let's reload. And so in Firefox, nothing at all shows. In Chrome, you'd have a little icon down here. That's what many of you have done, is copied this path and given it to me, and that does not work at all. It works here for the purpose of demonstrating. And there. What Chrome does is it displays the size that I gave it, but it says it's not there. So if I had made it a smaller image, it would just be a smaller box, but it still would not display. So there's the beginning. In order to turn these links into your navigation, what we will have to do is we will have to tell the links to be a class or an ID. And that's something that we will go over on another video, and we will also go over in class. Thank you very much. I hope this has been helpful. Take care. I will see you Monday evening.